Welcome back to Restauranttopia. We're going to talk about managing costs today, and I'm here with my co-host, Anthony Hamilton, David Ross, and myself is Brian Seitz. Hope you enjoy the show.
So we're talking about managing costs today. So in a restaurant, I know a lot of times, like when we're talking to restaurateurs and we talk about the term prime cost, I know sometimes there's a little bit of confusion in that and some people don't really maybe understand what that means. Maybe you could talk a little about that, Anthony.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for calling me a co-host. I appreciate that. I'm back in action, back in the saddle. Really excited about that. Prime costs to me are one of the biggest secrets in the industry, and I'm not sure as to why, right? And everybody always talks about food costs, they talk about beverage costs, they talk about labor costs, but no one really talks about prime costs. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this today was because I think it's so impactful on your whole operation, and understanding how to look at prime costs, you know, from a zoomed out lens rather than the granular approach of labor and everything. You know, there's a dynamic there, how they work together, right? Mm-hmm. And we'll talk a little bit about prime costs, but you know, and Dave, in your experience in restaurants, how do you feel about prime costs and how important are they?
Well, I think it needs defined first, because I think a lot of people don't really understand the significance of it and really what it is. You know what I mean? So when you look at prime costs, it's really, you know, that's your two major expenses in the restaurant combined together, primarily being your food cost and your labor cost.
Yep.
Correct?
Well, cost of goods sold, actually, because it includes beverage costs as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So really, when you look at that, so the best way to put it, you know, and I'm going to ask this more than answer it, is everything outside of your fixed costs of running a restaurant would be considered prime cost?
Yeah, it's predominantly your variable expenses, which are the ones absolutely in your control. So you can't really control your rent month to month, right? Like you get an opportunity once every 10 years to talk about that.
Sure.
Prime costs every day. Yeah. Every single day, you know? And to your point, the labor cost too is all in labor costs. You're including payroll taxes, benefits, everything in there. Mm-hmm. But boy, you know, when you think the industry average or industry benchmark is 65%, that represents 65% of your revenue stream. And not enough of us are aware. You know, we're focused on other things. It's like, what could be more important than 65% of your revenue stream? 70% of your revenue stream? Sure. Yeah, that's about it, right? Like, that's how it goes. So, you know, I want to talk about that today. I really want to deep dive into that and you know, get into prime costs and how we can, and not necessarily even manage them, but just how we can track them. Because I think most people can manage prime costs if they know what they are.
Sure. Well, and I think that is a great point, is that you constantly have to be revisiting it. I mean, if you're
every week.
Yeah, every week. If you're not constantly tracking, constantly looking at it, that thing is going to get away from you so quickly that now your food costs are out of line or your labor costs are out of line, and you can't get that money back. It's spent.
Yeah, sure is.
Right? No, and I think the amazing thing is people know that they've got to control the cost of goods. People know they have to control the labor, but I don't think a lot of people actually look at it together and say, what's that number I'm trying to hit as a whole? Because you may have a menu or a concept that runs higher cost of goods, but your labor, you know, can be lower. Or you may have a labor-intensive concept that's got way more labor, but you got maybe more
raw materials.
Yeah. So the cost of goods is lower. So
exactly.
So the balance really, you know, that's why when you say 65 is a nice number, when you start getting closer to 70, it's tough to make money. You start getting closer to 60, you're probably making money. But to put it together, I think a lot of restaurateurs don't know enough about putting those together and how do they manage it as a group. You know.
Well, a lot of times we just 33% our way into it, you know, and the industry benchmark's 33% food costs. And Brian, you're an attorney and you know that, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
If you had to guess, you walk in, zero food experience, you're like 33%, sounds good to me. Mm-hmm. And we all have that benchmark, but no one really understands why we have that benchmark. It just seems like a good markup. We do it on wine, we do it on food. And a lot of times, and Dave, to your point, what happens is restaurants open up and they just 33% everything. And then after maybe a year doing business, they get through the rigors. They look at the bank account and say, you know what? Bank account looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, let's look back how much money I spent per sales. Okay, 35%. That works for me. Yeah. 35% it is. There's my gold standard. Yeah. But it's like, you took a year to get there. You know, like imagine if you would have had your benchmark set and you worked towards a goal after like month 1 or month 2, when you got your feet under you, you might have been profitable for 10 months that you might not have known about, right? Sure. And certainly I'm not casting stones here because I've done the same thing. It took me probably, you know, a good 10 years in my professional development as a higher end manager to really understand prime costs, but that's because no one really taught me prime costs.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Sure. But I think that's the nature of the entrepreneur. You have 1,000 things going on in your restaurant, whether it's one of the line cooks called off, or there's an issue with it's wintertime here in Cleveland, that the area in front of the restaurant needs to be salted. You know, it's all those types of things. And prime cost, I think, because it's the minutia of life and just seems like homework that maybe people don't focus on it. But to your point earlier, if the difference is to making money and not making money is the the 10 points or 5 points there, that's something you should be visiting every single week and constantly be on top of that, because it's your livelihood, but it's the life of your business. You could be out of business if you fail on this.
100%. And you're right. It's money trimmed off your prime cost and straight to your bottom line. So there's a lack of motivation there. And I can tell you, from my opinion, one of the hardest things to deal with, and why there's this big kind of mental hurdle and maybe physical hurdle at that point, is, people are in love with the idea of counting inventory, and I was too. So I met a guy who kind of reprogrammed me, and that was what it comes down to. But counting inventory, especially in a fine dining restaurant where I came from, that's a 4 to 6 hour affair, and it takes 4 employees, 2 for the bar, 2 for the food, and you're doing it all day. On top of working what you're already working. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, when you're done, the numbers are never accurate anyway. So it's like, okay, you get pretty cynical about the process, right? Because in your heart of hearts that you're like 95%. Like,
how well was that done?
Yeah, exactly. Really, yeah. It's Sunday morning, you're a little hungover, you're down there counting the dry sauce.
I saw Steve drinking after work.
Exactly.
He's doing inventory on, this day.
Yeah, it doesn't work, And so then we start getting back to, it's like, okay, well, we have bad data. Well, why not make it easier? If we're going to have bad data, why not set it up to where we have bad data and make it super easy? And I don't mean bad data like as in it's flawed. I mean, the way I was reprogrammed was start looking at purchases. Instead of counting inventory all the time, just look at my purchases over sales every week and understand that that's not the most accurate data, but hell, even if I count inventory, I'm not accurate anyway. Right. So why not just do it off a report? Yeah. Why not just do it off a report in 2 minutes? Right. And so that's when I say reprogrammed, because I was very adamant about counting inventory. That's the only way you can get accurate. And truth be told, you should still do it, every quarter or, biannually, whatever the case may be. But for me, as far as tracking prime costs, what I'm doing, I know we talked about every week, and I think that's convenient, but most people run a 2-week payroll cycle. And we talk about doing almost zero work is the idea, because let's face it, if you have to put in a lot of work, you're not going to do this, right? No. Like any homework. So I would just wait till my payroll runs. And then when I get my payroll report from my company, it has all my benefits, has all my taxes, all the manager salary, everything I need is on that one report. Whatever came out of my bank account, saved for tips, that's my labor cost. And that's it. And that's what I use. And then I just print my purchases from my purveyors and my sales from my POS and compare the 3, and I'm good to go. There's my prime cost,
I think there's some benefit of doing it weekly on the food side of things, because if if there's something with portioning that's getting out of hand, or if there's a training thing that needs to be implemented, you can at least, now you're not 2 weeks behind the.
Yeah, that's fair. So, even bad ordering.
Or bad order, yeah. Because that's going to be a problem. And what does that look like? Can you match it up with your point of sale system and with your orders, and knowing what your food costs actually are and what a portion cost should actually be? What does that look like? So I think it's something you got to keep on top of, and I don't think enough people do it. I think that's the reason why some places go out of business. Yeah, that's the whole reason. They've missed the ball on the prime cost. Everything else is good. The concept is good. The customer service is good. The food is delicious, and they fail on prime cost, and they're not making money.
Yeah.
So true, so true. But if you got a finger on the pulse every week, chances are you're going to react to some capacity. And I think that's the ticket.
And something you say all the time. I'm crediting you, but I know this is a guy not quite as successful as you. But what gets measured gets managed.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
That's a great adage. Yeah.
So
Peter Drucker.
Yeah, right. No, but that resonates. No, but he might be a couple bucks, but that resonates in this. If you don't again, you can manage the food cost, the cost of goods, you can manage the labor, but you're not managing it together.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Understanding how prime costs, is broken down, I think is integral to the success of your business, especially in relation to the guest experience. And I gave an example. I taught a class not too long ago, and there was a burger and a steak there, right? And this is how impactful it is. And I showed a picture of the burger at 33% food costs. Mind you, you're only selling for $12, right? 33%, $12. Everybody in the room was very happy with that in comparison to the steak that I was selling for $32 at 50% prime or food cost, right? Mm-hmm. So you have the same amount of labor in each dish, but one selling for $30 and one selling for $12, and people still gravitated towards the $12 dish with a 33% food cost because that 33% is so burned in them. But I'll take the steak every time, and I'll tell you why. It's because that sales price, when you understand, we talked about variable costs and we talk about how this dynamic works. So the sales price in a steak is $30. That's 3 burgers worth of sales, right? Mm-hmm. So now you have 3 times the labor in those 3 burgers. You still got 1 time the labor in a steak. Mm-hmm. So as that sales price goes up, your labor percentage goes down. So I couldn't care less if you're running 50% food costs. If you're running 10% labor, we're all good. Mm-hmm. With the burger scenario, you're running 33% cost of goods on it. That's fantastic. but you're running like 40% labor because it's the exact same labor that goes into burger as the steak. And so based on that dynamic alone, it was like kind of this light bulb that hit the room, and hopefully I got through to some folks on that, because it's not always about that 33%.
Sure.
So what I'm trying to say here is that you can give your customers a much better value if you understand how to juggle these. You can offer different menu selections that you never thought would be possible, because a prime strip steak at $15, you're like, oh, 33%, I can't sell a dish for $45. But you could sell one at $30, right? Yeah. And just run 50% food cost on it. And then of course, like, oh no, you can't do that. Well, yeah, you can, because it takes the same amount of labor. Take your 50%, it drives everything else down, that sales price, you know?
Well, and that goes to, are you increasing your top line sales, and what is your check average looking like? I mean, if your check average is low, it's going to hurt you. I mean, you still got to worry about your prime cost, but check average being higher is going to be helpful.
And what's the gross profit on the dish? What I mean? Like, and again, you go in the labor is actually another. I think that's another like layer of the onion. But to put it simply, it's what's the gross profit when you got 33% food cost on a $12 item, you're making $8 a burger. Okay. When you got 50% food cost on a $30 item, that's $15. So you're gonna sell a burger and make $8, or you're gonna sell a steak and make 15.
Oh, but that 33% food cost.
Oh yeah, it's so much better. Well, I had a friend of mine and a very very successful and really creative chef who he literally would take whatever it cost him and he would multiply it by 3.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, that's
100%
for everything. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then you sit there and you're looking, and I'm like, okay, you're going back and you're looking at a steak that should be $30, but now it's 45 or 50.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, dude, I don't think that's going to sell.
No,
you know what I mean?
Of
Like,
course not. Well, you can't sell at 30 because that's 50%, right?
Right.
And I'm just going to speak on behalf of chefs. We're not so good at academics, just so you know. So that multiply by 3 was an easy trick we learned early on, and that's what we went by.
Yeah, but I think people get locked into that trick, and at the end of the day, you do have to look at gross profit. I mean, at the end, what are we trying to do here? Trying to make money.
Yeah.
So how can we drive the maximum amount of revenue out of each dish while make sure the sales are high? I mean, we could sell a $100 steak, but if you sell one of them, it's not very much fun.
You always got to remember everything we're talking
sell
about.
10 burgers to make that much money.
It's a lot more labor. A lot more labor.
Good
Yeah.
point.
But think about everything we talk about. We said percentage, and you have to intellectualize what's that a percentage of. It's a ratio, right? 65% of what? Well, your total sales. So the more sales go up, the smaller proportion of your labor and everything else go, right? So as far as increasing the prices, anyway, simply put. But understand that the percentages are a ratio of sales, a function of sales, and the higher your sales go, typically, if you have the same amount of people on, your labor cost is proportionally going to go down, exponentially, and that leads right into the bottom line. So I think prime costs, again, is so important. It's so important. If I could recommend to any operator, like, get on top of your prime costs immediately.
So let's talk about Restaurantopia. So you want to teach somebody this very simply that maybe has not been looking at this. Okay, they've managed numbers individually but haven't looked at it as a whole. They're just learning this today.
Yeah.
What's the first couple steps that you're going to take with the staff, with yourself, to drive this home and make sure this happens in your restaurant?
Yeah, first case, I'm going to be transparent about it with my staff. I'm going to get their buy-in on it, right? And I'm going to share the numbers with them on a regular basis. And I think oftentimes we don't do enough open book, so they're aiming for a target they can't see. So I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to define it. I'm going to say, look, it's my all-in cost of goods, my food and beverage. Everything I buy food and beverage-wise is a cost of goods, whatever it takes to produce a sale. I'm going to take my all-in labor and define all-in labor. Well, that's from your payroll report. After benefits, after taxes, after everything, that's your all-in labor, right? So I want to take my all-in cost of goods and my all-in labor and divide it by sales. And that's my prime cost. And get everybody on board and understand how they can impact that, I think is hugely important. The food cost model we talked about earlier is one I would have to spend some time on with my chefs.
Sure.
I think that one's more difficult to intellectualize, but I think once they grasp it, everybody's better off.
But you just got to start tracking it. You got to start. Tracking it. You got to see where you're at.
Yeah, that's it. And sorry, but that's step 3 maybe in the process. After I define it, after I open the book, I'm going to start tracking it, and we're going to track it on a regular basis. To your point, you wait too long, the train's already off the tracks. How you can get the train back off the tracks or back on the tracks? You can't, right? It's already off. Like, unless you got some cranes.
Well, I think the transparency is so key too, because so many people try to play hide the ball and keep the employees in the dark. At the end of the day, you need to let them know. And quite frankly, most of them don't realize how expensive everything is. They don't realize what the payroll taxes are and what all the other costs are associated with the restaurant. I mean, it's not this panacea of profit that people think it is. And especially I think employees and anyone who works with us realizes that it's difficult And if you go a bad month, I mean, as you go into the first of the year, how are you going to do in January, February, March if you don't have these things under control? People already spend all their money during the holidays, and now you have these 3 months before, in the Ohio area, we got the patio season, and that starts, and then people start going out more. But if the employees don't have the buy-in, don't realize what cost is, they're more likely, in my opinion, to have theft issues, to give stuff away, to overpour, to overportion.
Sure.
All the issues that are ultimately going to cost you money and could put you out of business.
Yeah, and sometimes it's best maybe just sit down with that exercise with $1, and you go, you get the staff and you go, guys, here's $1, and then you take the quarter and the dime and you go, guys, this is food, and then you take this and this is labor, and then this is rent, and then this is and then you show them how much change is left of that $1. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's the restaurant business. You know what I mean? And a lot of people.
It's pretty profound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean? Because everybody thinks, oh, you're the owner. Oh, you're, making all this money. Oh, you're, all this stuff. And in some cases you may be, but in a lot of cases you're not.
Yeah. Sure.
And you take that remainder and you start taking some pennies away because your food costs a little off.
Yeah.
A little waste here, a little theft here. Yeah.
Here's your heavy-handed cheese portion.
All of a sudden, those pennies become very, very significant in that example here.
Well, it's as my father used to say in the construction business, that's all your profit. Like that little bit left is your profit. It's like you start giving that away, you're out of business.
Yeah. No, it's a true story. But yet we readily give it away. It's funny how that works. But yeah, it's important, and I think understanding how to look at the prime cost as a whole, rather than just individual beverage, food, and labor, I think is so much more advantageous. You gotta get the whole story before you really, prescribe problems, right, or diagnose problems, I should say. Then you can prescribe the medication in the back end. But it's funny how it works.
And every situation's got a different equation. So you may have a situation where you've got a nice lease, and it's attractive, and that percentage hits here. So if you haven't looked at this stuff, you may go back and say, maybe I'm running 70% prime. When you actually start tracking it, but I'm okay. Like I'm
because you're paying 1% instead of 6% on your lease.
Yeah, or whatever it is. But if I'm at 70 and now all of a sudden I can get it to 68 in 30 days, and I can get it to 67, 66, 65. Over time, that's all going to be money in the bank. And that's the name of this game.
That's it. And left untracked, 70 is going to turn into 75 like that. Like it's just the moment you take your eye off the ball, because and we'll talk about this in another episode, but when you start doing food costing on your menu and what should your actual food cost be and what does it look like, most people don't know. So this just gives people the tool to say, all right, this is what my baseline is. This is what it should be. How can I work hard with my staff and my team to execute on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's good. And the last disclaimer I want to throw out is you got to be wary of tracking purchases. We talked about tracking purchases every week. Let's say your chef did order from the desk. They had a bad week. They weren't feeling well. They couldn't get on their feet to go check their shelves and order as accurately as you want them to as an owner or whatever the case would be.
Would you call it ordering from the desk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time, right? It's like, oh yeah, I think I saw a case of cauliflower in there. I don't need any, right? Or I saw 2 of those. I'll just get 1 to be careful. You got to go through and look at your shelves. But let's say purchases do come in high for a week, and we're tracking it every week. Like you got to have a soft hand, kind of velvet gloves when it comes to that, because you got to give that person an opportunity to recover for a week or 2. But at least they know you're aware, and at least you're all working towards that goal. But the worst thing you do is have a knee-jerk reaction and say, oh my God, costs are so high, we got to cut and trim. It's like, maybe just order it a little more. Like let it level out a week or 2.
Well, yeah, and does it even out? Like you'll see the trend once you start tracking it. I mean, if you track it with zero action for a little while, you'll see what the trends are, and then you'll know not to overreact or not to underreact.
Fair. Yeah, fair. Absolutely.
And you'll also, whether it's you got someone in the line that's given 2 scoops instead of 1 of the the chicken or whatever it is, those are the types of things you'll discover. It's like, what is different? When that chef is on board and there's an open dialogue, he's like, oh, I did order from the desk, that was my bad, take ownership, that was my fault. Or it's like, no, I did everything right, there's a problem here. What does it look like? Is this the first indicator of an actual issue?
Yeah, and then the last thing I wanted to bring up, because it popped in my head, was what's your experience on actually giving financial incentive to your management team for handling food cost and handling labor appropriately, or where you feel it should be? What are the pros and cons to that?
It depends on the location I worked at, and it depends on what kind of people I had under me. Let's face it, I haven't always had the best people under me, or beside me or over me. I mean, it's a long spanning career, and there a lot happened. If I felt comfortable with the people I hired, and I hired them based on, which we'll talk about in the next other episode too, I know they're professionals. I know that they're going to have integrity. The problem with incentivizing based on costs they can control is they have money dangling in their face. So what's stopping them from shortcutting you?
Right.
Meaning instead of prime rib, they're going to serve select rib because they can save $2 a pound. And now all of a sudden, I don't know, it's cooked, it's out of the oven, it looks like prime rib to me. I would notice if I ate it. My guests may or may not complain about it, but people cheat the system all the time, and it's easy to cheat like that. You can shortchange a lot of stuff, or you're trying to run inventory too skinny. You make your purchases look amazing so you get that bonus, and then you run out of food. So there's a really delicate balance there. So I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of monetarily incentivizing my management team based on sole numbers. In fact, I would rather not.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Okay. That's good insight.
I appreciate that insight. I like to give bonuses, whether it's on something that they can manipulate. I do agree with you. It's that bothers me.
Well, if they manage it right over a period of time, I'm okay with giving somebody, their share of the savings or whatever it is. But I agree, when you set it up, it's like, okay, guys, I want 32% food costs and I want 20% labor, and you know what I mean. And now
if you don't set parameters on how to get there, you're in trouble.
Oh, no question. Because
sure,
like you said, there's shortcuts there. Then all of a sudden, the schedule's skinny. So now we're not serving the people right because they're under scheduling.
Right.
I mean, the whole thing can.
So we're getting efficiency in front of effectiveness, and I think that's a bad move because step one, your guests have to be satisfied 100% through and through, and the brand standard has to be held up. And the more we dangle money in people's faces to make that cheaper, then the less integrity your organization is going to have.
Yeah, and just like anything we talk about, where there's going to be several different scenarios and different equations, and everybody's business is going to be a little bit different. So we'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. Please get to restauranttopia.com and give us your feedback. Positive and negative. We want it both, and or any future topics you'd like to hear. We appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, we'd love to hear what your system is for managing prime cost and what you found effective. So reach out to us, and we love the feedback. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. This is an episode I'd like to do a part 2 on, to be honest with you. I think we could really deep dive into cost management, especially with some feedback from you guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.